Greg Smith.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, and I congratulate the honourable gentleman for North Cornwall for securing this debate. Whilst I'll talk about the Equipment Theft Prevention Act 2023 in a little bit more detail later in my remarks, I would like to assure him from the comments that he made that GPS units were very much intended as part of that act to be included within scope. They were spoken about extensively at all stages of the debate before that act came into achieved royal assent, and I do urge the Minister to have that in mind as she prepares the necessary statutory instruments to fully bring the Act into force, which I believe have now been promised to come by this summer. But more fundamentally, rural crime is devastating to all rural areas, not least like mine in mid-Buckinghamshire, where the economy is majoritively agricultural and entire communities are centred around farming and the local economy that farming supports. Whether it's theft, hare coursing, fly tipping or antisocial behaviour, to name just a few, the countryside is too often an easy target for criminal gangs looking to make a quick buck. And it is imperative that the government recognises this and takes steps to build on the work that we did as Conservatives in government to tackle and prevent rural crime, particularly over the last few years. According to the Countryside Alliance's 2023 rural crime survey, fly tipping accounted for the most commonly reported crime, to speak to the honourable gentleman before me's point, at 37% of cases, followed closely by agricultural machinery theft at 32% and trespassing at 31%. Now, of course, farm machinery, it goes without saying, is clearly essential to the smooth running of farms. These are not just tools, they're the backbone of the entire agricultural machine. Whether it is a combine harvester, a tractor or a high-tech bit of equipment, the cost of replacing these items can run into tens of thousands of pounds. And in 2022 alone, rural crime cost UK farmers over £50 million, with farm machinery theft accounting for a substantial portion of that. NFU Mutual, and let's face it, they insure the vast majority of agricultural machinery in this country, NFU Mutual estimates that the cost of rural crime increased by 4.3% year on year in 2023 to 52.8 million, and the cost, specifically to the point on GPS theft alone, reached an estimated 4.2 million in 2023, which was a 137% increase. Quad bike and all-terrain vehicle theft cost an estimated 3.2 million in 23, up 9% on 2022. And it's not just heavy machinery and equipment that's targeted. Often it's fuel, which is all too easy for organised gangs to simply siphon off, load into a van, and off they go, leaving victims with huge losses and hefty bills to restock. I visited a farm in my constituency last year, actually directly opposite Chequers. It seems like an unlikely place for opportunist thefts to take place, opposite one of the most heavily armed and secured premises in my constituency. But these farmers fell victim to the loss of some 2,000 litres of red diesel that was siphoned off and taken away in the night. On top of, this particular farm operates a very, very good farm shop, and the thieves got away with 2 chest freezers full of meat destined for that shop. You know, that isn't just a huge financial impact on those farmers, on that business, but it's of course equally, and the honourable gentleman in his opening speech this debate referenced it, plays a huge toll on those business owners, those farmers' mental health after they have been targeted. Now, these criminal gangs are incredibly difficult to apprehend when operating across county lines, and raids, these raids, even often through the night, take several hours and targeting several farms with criminals heading off great distances with the stolen items. Some are even shipped overseas and sold without any traceability. The ever-evolving nature and sophistication of criminal gangs makes this a severe uphill battle. But it is a battle, Ms McVeigh, that I would put to this House and to the Minister that we are able as a country to win, and that we can defeat these gangs. My private member's bill now act requiring retailers to register ATV sales and ensure vehicles are fitted with unique identifiers in the form of forensic marking will help police forces track those that fall into the wrong hands. And it is the use of GPS trackers and forensic marking on machinery that is already helping those farmers that voluntarily fit it to their equipment to ensure that stolen items can be recovered. Where voluntary applied, law enforcement agencies have followed leads and they have caught criminals before they can profit from their crimes. Now, my Act having achieved royal assent in 2023, I was hopeful that the regulations required, the secondary legislation, would have been passed before the general election got called last year. That was not to be, or passed quickly after it. But I am assured from commitments that have been made in the main chamber that those pieces of secondary legislation are coming, and I would be grateful if the Minister could reconfirm that in her summing up later, that the summer is still the intended point of arrival, that we can debate those in a delegated legislation committee. Another common sense piece of legislation passed under the last government was the Police Crime Courts and Sentencing Act, which increased the maximum sentence for hair coursing from a fine to 6 months in prison. But it's not just the legislation that's making a difference, it's the commitment of local law enforcement. In Buckinghamshire, Thames Valley Police have been working tirelessly to track down and apprehend those responsible for thefts and other rural crime. Increased patrols, better surveillance systems, and collaboration with local farmers and rural communities have contributed to a drop in farm machinery theft in areas where these initiatives have been rolled out. With the support of Thames Valley Police's Police and Crime Commissioner Matthew Barber, I would actually argue that Thames Valley is leading the way with a commitment in the 24-25 policing budget for an uplift in officers to tackle rural crime. In fact, a doubling of Thames Valley's rural crime task force. The National Rural Crime Unit has been referenced earlier in this debate. That launched in March 22 some years ago has made a huge impact, and the Rural Crime Task Force in Thames Valley, led by Stuart Hutchings, has really been a trailblazer feeding into that. And they've already seized more than £5 million worth of property, including vehicles, drugs, plant machinery and tools, as well as completing hundreds of investigations and supporting hundreds of people with crime prevention advice. I would like to pay particular tribute to the National Rural Crime Unit, led by Superintendent Andy Huddleston, who was instrumental in helping put my bill together and who I very much value as a friend and someone who I look to for sage advice. That unit has recovered stolen property, including agricultural machinery and vehicles, worth £10 million since 2023. It's coordinated operational responses across the UK that resulted in multiple arrests, as well as disrupting organised crime groups. The National Construction and Agri-Theft Team, which sits under the NRCU, seized £3.1 million worth of stolen vehicles and machinery in 2023 alone. And even in the last few weeks, this coordinated approach, started by the last government and hopefully continued by this one, has produced significant results following a series of hair coursing and associated antisocial behaviour incidents across the southeast and east of England, with key arrests made by Cambridgeshire Police with support from Thames Valley Police. This reinforces the effectiveness of intelligence sharing and coordination between forces that makes entire regions and the whole country safer by stopping these gangs from operating. So to conclude, Ms McVeigh, rural communities in Buckinghamshire and the whole country deserve the same level of protection as urban areas. We must ensure our hard-working farmers are able to focus on what they do best, feeding the nation, without the looming threat of theft, intimidation or criminal damage hanging over their heads. And I urge the Minister to ensure that the good words that have been said about fighting rural crime under this government so far are turned into a solid reality that will protect rural communities, my own and all those others across the country, in the coming months and years.